Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Today, continuing the Versus series, I'm doing a video on Hakeem Olajuwon versus Shaquille O'Neal. These guys were among the best centers in the NBA in their times, and of course in league history. Hakeem came a bit earlier, while Shaq played a little bit later. The two of them are bare minimum top 15 players of all time, and they also happen to get ranked very close to each other in all-time lists, and personally for me, it's very close, as I put Shaq at number 9 and Hakeem at number 10. Now, keep in mind, if you are new to this series, that opinion is subject to change depending on how I feel by the time I'm done writing this script. In my top 50, I had Kobe over Tim Duncan, but when I did the first video in this series, I changed my mind and put Duncan over Kobe. So let's see if I change my mind here. Shaq or Hakeem, who is greater? Let's find out. With this series, I like to break it down into a few categories to keep it as simple as possible. Scoring, defense, playmaking / rebounding / intangibles, accomplishments, and then putting all of this into context with the help they had throughout their careers, as well as, in this case, their competition. Let's start with scoring. This is a very interesting one because when we look at prime numbers, with me dictating Shaq's prime to be from his rookie season to his second to last season in LA, as Shaq had an injury in 2004 that was really the start of his decline, I dictated Hakeem's prime to be from his rookie season to the 95-96 season. When we look at these raw numbers, Shaq averaged 3 more points per game with a 2% better true shooting percentage, which implies that Shaq is a better scorer. However, I feel it's really close, and it basically comes down to personal preference. This kind of comes down to the conversation I had in a video that I did a while ago, which was skill versus athleticism, and by a while ago, I mean like a month and a half ago. But with Shaq versus Hakeem, it's really like Hakeem is more about finesse, and Shaq is more about power, and who you think is better comes down to which one you prefer. Hakeem was a master in the post, and though I am tired of hearing this term, especially on Twitter, for people that think Jamal Crawford is like a top 50 player of all time, Hakeem had a fucking bag. He probably isn't the greatest post scorer ever in terms of just pure production. That title would have to go to the all-time leader in points in Kareem, but in terms of having different moves and looking the best, Hakeem wins that in a landslide. He also had somewhat of a mid-range jump shot. Unfortunately, there were no shooting numbers for Hakeem's prime, but later in his career, he shot 44% of his shots from 10 feet to just inside the three-point line, and he shot 42%, which is pretty good. Now, I do not believe that Hakeem in his prime shot 44% of his shots from mid-range. That was really just a product of his age. If you look at those numbers, they gradually got higher in percentage taken as he got older. I'd say it was probably like 30-ish% of his shots came from mid-range, and he shot pretty well from there, and it's also worth noting that he wasn't just a stationary mid-range shooter. He had a good face-up and post-fadeaway game that he went to pretty damn often. And then if we look over at Shaq, he had more skill than he's often given credit for, specifically in the post, but in terms of skill offensively, it's obviously no contest. But the main reason why Shaq was not nearly as skilled in the post is because he didn't need to be. Like, why bother doing 5 spin moves in a shimmy shake when you can just knock your defender over and dunk on whatever poor soul has the misfortune of being under the basket? Like, Shaq was crazy dominant. It's like me playing my 13-year-old sister one-on-one. Like, I would just push her out of the way and lay it up. In this case, Shaq was doing this against fucking 7-foot NBA players. So, offensively, what do you prefer more, the skill and versatility and the variety of moves, or the dominance? Personally, for me, I am preferring the dominance, so I'm going to give this edge to Shaq. However, it is very close, and I could completely understand if you think Hakeem was better offensively. But then if I'm looking at the offensive ceiling on top of that, I think Shaq is just better. Like, if I need a center to go and drop 40, I trust Shaq more because he can simply force offense more, and being a physical player rather than a finesse player, he's someone who is going to be more consistent offensively. Like, Hakeem is way more likely to have an off night than Shaq, and just because I prefer Shaq's playstyle, I'm going to give him that edge on offense, especially considering that Shaq already had the edge in the box score. Moving on to defense, this is and isn't not a contest, which I realize makes no sense, but basically what I'm getting at is Shaq was a pretty good defensive player in Orlando up until his last year and a half there, basically when he was at his youngest and before he put on his weight. I am fully in the camp and of the opinion that Shaq should not have put on a bunch of pounds, and that was actually bad for his career, especially his longevity. I genuinely think young Shaq in Orlando was better than Shaq in LA, even if he won his MVP in LA. He was better offensively in Los Angeles with that extra weight. However, he was a miles better defensive player in Orlando when he was not that heavy. And it's not like Shaq couldn't score in Orlando. In fact, his two best scoring seasons are essentially tied between his MVP season and the season that came in 1995 when he averaged 29.3 points on 59% true shooting. His MVP season was essentially the same, but the difference with Shaq in 1995 was he was a good defensive player. But that's kind of a side tangent. Point is, Shaq was a pretty damn good defensive player in his early days, but in LA and his last couple years in Orlando wasn't the case. He was basically just mediocre to slightly above average once he got to be 350 pounds. And yes, I'm aware that Shaq made 2 all-defensive second teams in Los Angeles and didn't make any all-defensive teams in Orlando, but that can be chalked up to the NBA voters being stupid and the fact that the center position had a bit of a drop-off in the early 2000s, and the NBA awards being a popularity contest. Marc Gasol made all-defensive second team the year that he won Defensive Player of the Year. This shit just makes no sense half of the time, and I honestly do not value all-NBA or all-defensive selections all that much. But in the case of Hakeem, well, he is in contention for the title of the greatest defensive center of all time. Now, I'm going to give that title to Bill Russell, but Hakeem is certainly in that conversation. Dude was just a straight-up ridiculous shot blocker. He averaged 3.5 blocks in his prime, averaged 4.6 at his absolute highest, and even though Shaq was a good defender in his early days, his overall defensive ability for his entire prime was basically slightly above average, while Hakeem is literally a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year and one of the greatest defenders ever. So that one goes to Shaq. Then if we're talking about the other areas in the game, starting with rebounding, Hakeem was a better rebounder than Shaq, which is kind of disappointing considering the fact that Shaq was as big as he was. He never led the league in rebounding once. You'd think a guy who weighs as much as an average black bear would be able to at least once lead the league in rebounding, while Hakeem led the league in rebounding twice. Now, the actual difference in their rebounds per game wasn't much. It's basically 0.2, but when you consider the fact that Hakeem played next to Ralph Sampson for the first 3 years of his career, and the season after he left, he led the league in rebounds, I think that means he was just getting robbed of some based on who he was playing with. I think Hakeem was a better rebounder, and then playmaking-wise, it's basically tied. And looking at accomplishments, Shaq obviously had 2 more championships, 1 more Finals MVP. Hakeem had 2 Defensive Player of the Years, and both of them won 1 MVP. But personally for me, the difference of the 2 championships is made up for by the fact that one of those championships came outside of Shaq's prime where he averaged 13 points per game, and I'm mostly just looking at the actual primes here. But 2, when you consider the context of the help that these guys had in their particular championship years, I think it gets a lot closer than the difference of just 2 versus 4. And then of course, Hakeem has that edge with the Defensive Player of the Year awards, which also makes up for that department as well. Shaq, in Los Angeles, played alongside one of the 10 greatest players in NBA history. Now, in 2000, for Shaq's first championship, Kobe was not a superstar, just a very good all-star, and because he was injured in the finals, that championship was pretty close to single-handedly won by Shaq, though Kobe did save him in 1 game in that series, but that honestly just made up for the fact that he underperformed for most of that series due to injury. So 2000, all credit in the world goes to Shaq. However, 2001 and 2002, Shaq was playing with a bona fide superstar player in Kobe, and that's way more help than Hakeem had in any of his title years. In 1994, the Rockets had one all-star? And that was Hakeem? Did you guys see how I looked at my script and pretended I didn't know something that I already knew for a long time? for a point of emphasis. Just thought I'd give you guys a behind the scenes. He won MVP that year with averages of 27 points, 12 rebounds, and 3.7 blocks, leading the Rockets to just short of 60 wins. He also won Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. Now, don't get me wrong, this Rockets team was not bad. It was actually pretty decent in terms of talent, but it was even better with the system they had, which they should get more credit for because it was ahead of its time, and the system was essentially shooters around Hakeem. The starting lineup was Kenny Smith, good shooter and a guy who says it's over at every fucking dunk contest to a truly extraordinarily annoying degree. Like, we get it, Kenny, you made an iconic call one time. Please, for the love of God, let it go. Anyways, sorry about that. Vernon Maxwell, who did not shoot particularly well from three this season, but still shot them, and you wouldn't see a defense leaving him open anytime soon. And there was Robert Horry, who was a good shooter as well. There were also good shooters off the bench like Scott Brooks and Chris Gent. But this was just an okay roster around an amazing talent. And taking a look at the playoffs specifically, in the second round he faced Charles Barkley. Conference finals he faces the pedophile and the most overrated player in NBA history. And in the finals he matches up with Patrick Ewing, one of the greatest centers ever, and he fucking destroys him. Then next year they get Clyde Drexler, who is an all-star, but unfortunately because of his age he's no longer a superstar caliber player, but because of some chemistry issues they fall all the way to the 6th seed. In the first round they get the Jazz again. Hakeem averages 35. Suns again. Hakeem averages 30. Conference finals they face the Spurs, led by one of the greatest centers ever in David Robinson, and Hakeem destroys him for stealing an MVP award from him, with Hakeem averaging 35 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4.2 blocks, meaning he nearly averaged a 5x5. All of this, by the way, while not having home court advantage. And in the finals, he meets up with Shaq, and he destroys him as well, at least offensively, sweeping them in that series. Now, I do not think individual player matchups matter at all in terms of ranking them. Maybe they're just a mismatch for each other at times. That doesn't determine who is actually better. Like, that's just an annoying mindset to have. Like, Kyrie Irving has gotten the best of Steph Curry plenty of times, but Steph Curry's clearly a better player. But just to put it into perspective, what that finals run was, that is 3 all-time great centers that he faced within those 2 years. He matched up with all 3 of those guys, got the better of those matchups, winning 2 championships, all doing so with just 1 all-star in 1 season out of the 2. Shaq matched up with an old David Robinson, Rick Smits, who is good offensively but not so much defensively and very scrawny, Dikembe Mutombo, who was good but not an all-time great and very scrawny, and Todd McCulloch, who was nicknamed Big Mac and was out of the league this season after Shaq averaged 36 and 12 on his bum ass. Point is, Hakeem won 2 with a considerably lower amount of help against some all-time great centers in the golden age of that position, while Shaq played in an era that was pretty lacking in center talent outside of himself, with a top 5 player in the league for 2 out of 3. Now, the fact that he got 3 rings in his prime instead of 2 does make up for the fact that I think Hakeem's were more impressive, as well as getting points for that Miami championship, but I don't think it's as simple as just saying, well, Shaq had 4 and Hakeem had 2. Championships have varying degrees of value to each player's name depending on the context. So with all this said, I think you can all tell where this is going, and I honestly didn't think it would go here. I now believe that Hakeem is greater than Shaq. I think it's close, but I'm giving it to Shaq. I went into this initially pretty certain of my position that Shaq was a greater talent, but upon looking into it, I must say my mind has changed. As for why, well, I just think Hakeem had a better all-around game and did more with less. It's close, so if you disagree with me, I completely understand, but personally for me, I'm going to put Hakeem over Shaq, and I actually think by the time I'm done with this series, I might release an updated top 50 of all time, because this series is really making me take a hard look at my rankings. Again, real quick, please go check out that podcast with Kenny. Very good time, and everybody loves King of the Fourth Quarter in this community, so give it a watch. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like, subscribe for more NBA content like this, and keep the outro music.